Hello, everyone. This is Susan Bennett, the original voice of Siri. I've been asked to answer some questions for you, and question number 1 is pretty extensive. I think there are maybe like 8 questions within question number 1, so I'll try to take it piece by piece. How did I become the original voice of Siri? Well, that is the question. I have absolutely no idea. The closest I can come to guessing is that I did a lot of IVR recording or text-to-speech recording, and apparently my voice was chosen, but I don't really know how. In our digital culture that we have, many of us voice talent are auditioning without even knowing we're auditioning. We're on people's different websites and such. So that's the only thing that I can suggest. I never really heard exactly how my voice was chosen. As far as participating in the casting, nope. And the work that I did that ultimately became the voice of Siri was supposedly phone messaging, some sort of generic voicing for phones. And so because the recordings were done back in 2005, we lay people, or we normal people, i.e. not engineers or technological geniuses, didn't realize where all of this was going to be used and what was going to happen to it ultimately. So I did not know that I was recording the voice of Siri. It came as a complete surprise. The way the recordings were done, I initially worked in the month of July 2005, 4 hours a day, 5 days a week, to record the basic vocabulary that became Siri. Now, what I did was read thousands of phrases and sentences that had been created to get all of the sound combinations in the language. So the recordings were kind of nonsensical. The sentences were created for sound and not at all for content or meaning. So I was reading crazy things like, cow hoist in the tub hut today. Fossa, ask fussy. Say the shrouding again, say the shredding 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 again. Very, very tedious work. It was pretty interesting, maybe for the first 50 or 100 sentences, but then technologically it was a little bit challenging from the voice actor point of view in that every sentence or phrase had to be read very consistently for the concatenation process that was going to happen at the end. Concatenation really just means linking things together, but in a technological sense, the meaning is that when my recordings and other people's recordings were done, technicians and computers, of course, would go into the recordings and extract sounds, reform these sounds into new phrases and sentences, and those are what ended up on our devices. Those are what ended up being Siri's, Alexa's, etc., answers to our questions. As a voice actress, the main challenges that I faced recording the voice of Siri were, I guess, being extremely articulate, having to be very articulate, and to be very, very consistent with every sentence that was read. So it was kind of hard on the vocal cords because you couldn't do any sort of ups and downs in the voice when you normally talk. You kind of do this and you go up and down for emphasis. Those sentences had to all be read very, very monotone and very consistently. Okay, defining Siri's personality. Well, I think people can all agree that especially the original voice was a little bit what we like to call in the United States snarky, meaning that she was a little feisty and could perhaps be a little cutting in her remarks. And she did have a bit of cynicism about her, I think, but I think that's why people liked her. They enjoyed talking to her and hearing some of her pretty poignant responses. Now, as far as getting some of my personality, perhaps, because I do have a bit of an acerbic sense of humor. But I would have to also say that the actual sound of Siri probably came from the fact that I was reading for hours and hours on end. And so I'm sure that it kind of affected the vocal cords to sound a certain way, which means perhaps a little deeper than my typical voice is. Okay, question 4 is asking, how do I see the phenomenon of digital voices affecting the future? Well, all I can say is that I don't think they're going away. I can only say that with the speed of technological improvement, that they will continue to sound more and more human and more lifelike and less robotic. As far as how voice interaction with between actual humans and devices, how that impacts language and communication, I don't know that it's necessarily the voices that are having the impact. It's the whole idea of technology in general. The fact that with technology, our means of communication, we have a lot of means of communication, but they usually depend on saying very short sentences or phrases or even abbreviations, and I think that is, in the long run, I think that we lose out on a lot by making everything so abbreviated, because we have a lot of incredible vocabulary words. In fact, in English, there are over 1 million words in English. So we can be very precise and very succinct with what we're trying to say. But it seems like with technology, we're shortening all of our responses. And I think that's fine if you're on the road and you're in a hurry and you're just trying to tell someone, texting someone that you can be there at the time that was recommended or set. That's totally fine. But as far as trying to get across any sort of complex thoughts, it's really hard to say. I really don't really have an exact opinion about that. I do know, especially with the younger generations, those people are not that interested in expressing things verbally. And much of the communication, they talk to their devices, but basically I think just to get information. And so the communications are always very short. Once again, I don't think that has as much to do with the actual devices as it does with just technology in general, the way it's going. Who knows? Someday we may just be speaking in ones and zeros. And yes, it does seem like most of the virtual assistants are female. And I've been asked this before. Why do I think most technology companies use female voices instead of male voices? Perhaps one reason is because Siri did sort of start off as a type of telephone. That's, we had obviously she's a computer, but she's a phone and she's a means of communication. And historically speaking, most of the telephone operators in the past were female. And that could be one reason. It was just sort of a natural transition. Also, generally, the female voice is considered to probably be more pleasant, more just softer in general. That's just merely a guess. I don't really know. At this point in time, what do I think about Siri's competitors? Are they really different from each other? Well, that was the thing that used to really distinguish Siri from all the other digital voices, is that she really did have a personality. She was funny, and she would have these crazy comebacks, and she would, poke fun at you and be really interesting. And she did have a lower sort of, more mature-sounding voice. Now with OS 11, the new Siri voice is not mine, and she speaks much, much higher. She's much more casual, and to me, she sounds a lot like the other voices like Google and Alexa. And perhaps that was the result of a lot of research on the part of all these corporations. They decided that that a young female voice was the way to go. So I really don't know. Well, your last question is pretty interesting, and I'm not sure how well I can answer it. Talking about a new audio renaissance and the fact that sound, we can't really escape sound anywhere. You go into restaurants now and there are TVs on in every room. And even when you're shopping, if you go to a mall, even an outdoor mall, they have music piped in. It's almost like we're afraid of silence. For myself personally, I really get tired of hearing noise. I think it can be the opposite of calming. And we already live in a pretty stressed environment in the developed countries of the world. So, in my opinion, what are the main challenges we're facing to make the world sound better? Well, speaking as a musician, I'll have to say that I agree with what Quincy Jones said about young kids now, is that they haven't ever really heard music, at its best, because they're listening a lot on earbuds and just small devices with tiny speakers. And so I think it would be nice if they could just improve just the general sound quality of the things that we do listen to. And then I think it's also important to take a break from it all, to get away from it and just sit there next to a tree and not hear anything except maybe a little wind. Anyway, I hope that answers all your questions, and I appreciate your inviting me to give my opinions for what they're worth. And thank you so much. And Siri would like to say, I wish you all the best. Goodbye.